Hey guys, it's coming in my review for Stowaway. What Stowaway is essentially about is basically we center on this three-person crew. They're going on this mission to Mars, and it seems like things are working out pretty well for them, but one day this Stowaway ends up somehow ending up onto their ship. They don't really know what they're really supposed to do with him, and they quickly realize that this guy is directly jeopardizing the lives of everyone on board, mainly because they do not have enough oxygen for him and everyone else. So now they have to make a tough decision whether or not they want to kick this guy off the ship, or if they're going to find a way to kick someone else off, because only three of them can really make it. So now they really have this dilemma of what they're really going to do. So Stowaway overall, I was not that excited for this film. I've said it before, whenever there's a sci-fi film on Netflix, I am very cautious with how to feel about it. You know, the last film I was really excited about that was a sci-fi film was a film called The Midnight Sky. I thought that film was maybe finally going to be like the film that Netflix deserves in terms of space movies, and it was very disappointing. I really don't remember that film at all. It was incredibly dull, and I just was not a huge fan of it. And something I've noticed, you know, is that a lot of the time they make movies like this, they have all these big stars and they make you think that this is going to be something really big, but it usually turns out to be really dull and mediocre. So I really was not expecting all that much more from Stowaway. I thought it was an interesting concept, but I was expecting it to be probably really convoluted and boring, and I just wasn't really expecting much from this film. But surprisingly, I have to say, I actually enjoyed this film more than I expected to. This is surprisingly a much more grounded and realistic take that is actually one of the more intriguing premises that I've seen in intriguing space movies that I've seen in quite a bit, and one that definitely did a lot more for me than I was overall expecting it to. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. I will say that's definitely, I think, the biggest draw in terms of this movie. That is the one thing that was definitely keeping me hopeful. So I'm like, okay, this is definitely a really talented cast here, and everyone really does deliver. I think everyone really does give a very strong performance, but let's first talk about Anna Kendrick, because she's one of the most likable actresses, I think, in Hollywood right now, but I feel like she's also kind of had a bit of a down spiral recently, where a lot of the films she's been in are either films that not a lot of people have seen, or they're very, like, low-budget, direct-to-DVD stuff that's just bad and wastes her. But thankfully, I'm able to say, I think this is definitely one of the better roles that she has had in quite a long time. Zoe as a character is not entirely complex, but she's someone that is very kind-hearted. She's someone that is really conflicted with how she's really supposed to go about this whole thing, and I think Kendrick is given a lot to do as an actress as a result. This is a very emotional performance for her, and she really does deliver. There's one moment especially in the third act, and she almost had me near tears. I mean, I thought she really was selling it here, and it really does show just how talented of an actress that Kendrick really is. I think this film actually did utilize her a lot better than I expected it to, and she definitely ended up being one of the best things about this movie. I really enjoyed her in this role a lot. However, for me, the big standout of this entire film, and the person that I think this film just would not be as good if he wasn't in there, is Shamier Anderson, who plays the character of Michael. He, of course, is the eponymous Stowaway, and he does a phenomenal job, may I say. I have not really seen him in a lot of other things before, but I feel like after this film, he's going to be getting a lot more roles, because I really liked what he ended up doing here. This is a character that throughout the entire movie, you can see has a very haunted past. There is a specific reason why he has ended up on board, and Anderson really goes all out in showing just how this character is really feeling in this given moment, because he knows that he's not really supposed to be here, but you can also see that he's someone that's very caring and genuine, and he really does want to help everyone. And just diving deeper into his past and what he's going through and the bond that he ends up forming with Anna Kendrick especially, it's really well done, and Anderson really does kill it within this role. I really loved what he ended up doing here. Like I said, I think he is one of those actors that we're definitely going to be hearing about moving forward, and I just really like the performance he gave in this film. As far as the rest of the cast goes, I mean, there's not really much to say. The only other actors in this film are Daniel Day Kim and Toni Collette, and they both do give give really good performances. In terms of the acting, everyone is really great here. I didn't think anyone was off their mark or anything like that. And having, the cast especially, I think is one of the things that really does need to anchor this film in order for it to work. And thankfully, it really does. I think everyone really did kill it here. But now let's get to the directing and the writing here, because that's the other thing that really did impress me about this film. Joe Penna, who is the director here, he's not someone that I'm overly familiar with. I've heard he's done some really good movies, like, say, Arctic, for example, and things like that, but I really enjoyed his directing throughout this film. I think the thing that he does really well is that he keeps the film very grounded. This feels like if this situation were to play out, this is very much what would happen, and I think he does a really good job with that. He takes it very seriously, and it really does work as a result, but you can also see this is something that he did put a lot of passion into, and I thought Penna overall did a really good job with directing this film, especially the moments that are really supposed to invest you emotionally. He really does a good job with that, and I very much did enjoy his directing in this film, but the writing as well is something else that, again, I thought was a lot better than I really did expect it to be. I mean, the premise alone, yes, it is definitely very basic, but that's one of the things that really does work about this film, is that there isn't really a way to fully overcomplicate things, and I think that actually does help the film. Because of that, you're able to really just kind of dive headfirst into this situation, but also really take your time to get to know these characters. In fact, it takes a while for our Stowaway to get on board. We understand who these characters are, what their roles are. Anna Kendrick's the medical researcher, Daniel Day Kim's more the biologist, and then Toni Collette is the commander of the ship. And, we see how much these three really do depend on each other. And this gives us a really good idea of why the ship is designed for three people. It's meant to work with these three people, and without them, they're not as strong. And that's why once Anderson's character comes into the mix of everything, this is why things get a lot more complicated, because they don't just want to kick this guy off board. He's really nice. He's really kind-hearted. He's someone that really cares about a lot of these people. And so they're grappling with the idea that, well, the logical thing to do is to just get rid of this guy and tell him to, and, get him to leave, but we don't want to kill him. But at the same time, if one of us is gone, we don't know if we're really going to survive. So it's a really ethical dilemma, and it's presented in a really interesting way, especially with the way that they go about this, but especially our character of Zoe, who is easily the most compassionate character throughout the entire movie. Toni Collette's character is, very by the book and things like that. And then Daniel Day Kim, he doesn't really want much to do with this guy at all, but you see that Zoe really sees the good in him. She really wants to keep him on board. She starts to develop a very close bond with him, and the two of them especially, there's this one really great conversation that they end up having, and you see that there's definitely a lot of there's a lot of similarities between the two, and this really gets her a lot more attached to Michael as a character. And like I said, Michael's reasoning for being on board was really well handled. It was a lot more emotional than I was overall expecting it to be, but it's really well done, and it gets you to really care about his character that much more. There's a lot of tragedy that has gone on within his life, especially as of recently, and it gets you to really feel for him. You get the sense that he's on the ship, obviously not by choice, but it's kind of a way for him to grapple with recent events. And I thought that, again, was really well handled overall. I liked the way they ended up going about it, and also the way this situation really does escalate. It's not like Michael gets on board and immediately they're like, all right, we got to get rid of this guy. They don't realize it until later on that this is a legitimate problem. And so you're really wondering how they're really going to get out of this. How are they really going to end up fixing everything? And I think that's what's so good about this screenplay, is that it really does take its time and is investing you throughout, because you don't really know what's going to end up happening there. And Zoe as a character is constantly thinking of other solutions to potentially, cause them from not having to make the decision that they ultimately think they have to. She doesn't want to have to do that. And you really do relate with her as a character because you also like Michael. You don't want Michael to go. You think that he's, you know, someone that is, again, he seems like too nice of a guy to get rid of. Why would you want to do such a thing to him? And I think that's something else that they overall did a really good job with. So yeah, I think the screenplay here is overall very well written. There's a lot of things that really do work. The cinematography in this film, it's very contained. I will definitely say that. It's very contained, but it's really beautiful to look at. There are scenes of space, but don't expect too many of that. That comes a lot more into the third act of the film, and when it happens, it's really well shot. But what I really liked about the cinematography is, again, you feel like you're on this ship with them, and they do a very good job with that. There's a lot of great scenes of like Daniel Day Kim and him being a biologist and you getting to see what he's doing, or Zoe and you getting to see more of what, you know, she does and the research that she's doing, or Toni Collette tending to the ship. There's some really good visual storytelling going on there, and I thought they did a really good job with the cinematography overall. The score as well, I definitely really did enjoy. It's not played a lot, but when it is, it's definitely very effective. And the editing, I will say, this movie is a little bit too long. There are some scenes that do drag here and there, and I think they definitely could have done a little bit. And I think if they would have maybe cut like 10 or 15 minutes from this movie, it might have flowed just a little bit better, because the second half, it does drag a bit, and I think they could have done maybe a little bit more with it. But overall, I was very invested in the film, a lot more than I expected to be. That being said, this film is definitely not perfect. There are some flaws that I think do bring it down quite a bit. The biggest one being is that while you are invested in Zoe's character and Michael's characters, you can't really say the same for Daniel Day Kim and especially Toni Collette. There's a little bit more to Daniel Day Kim. We get a little bit more into his backstory, what his entire purpose is. There's a really good scene with him and Michael and them sort of bonding a little bit, and I definitely did appreciate that overall. I thought that was definitely, and you also do see like his passion for being a biologist, but there's just not enough of him in the film. I think we needed to dive a bit more into his character, and they just didn't do a lot with him. And then Toni Collette, I'm sorry to say, as much as I like her as an actress, she really doesn't have a lot to do in this film. They don't really do a ton with her, and that was a little bit disappointing, especially if you're coming to this movie for Toni Collette. I think you will overall be a bit disappointed by how that really does turn out. And then the actual ending of the movie, I thought was a good ending, but I will admit it was a bit predictable, the way they ended up going about it. I think it's definitely something where, like, if you're watching the movie, you probably can see this specific outcome happening, what ends up going on within the third act. It's not surprising how things do wrap up, but I thought it definitely was the right way for the movie to end, so that's not really something that bothered me as much as some other things. And there definitely are some moments throughout this film that can feel very derivative. I think that, you know, there's a lot of moments in this film that you can probably notice from other space films. It's not completely original in that way, but for me at least, it didn't bother me quite as much as other ones. Overall, Stowaway is very effective as a film. It's a lot more self-contained than I was really expecting. It's got a great cast throughout. It has a ethical dilemma that's presented actually really well. The story itself might at points be a little simple, but I think it really does elevate from that, because it really does tell this story very well. It's got some great visuals when it's there. There definitely are some things that I think could have been a little bit better written. There are definitely some elements that feel the film is a bit overlong at points, but considering how these films usually turn out on Netflix, especially space ones, this was a lot better than I was overall expecting. I think Anna Kendrick and Shamier Anderson's performances alone are enough for a reason to check it out, but the story itself is actually really well done, and I think in general is really going to surprise you. This movie might not be for everyone, but for me, it definitely was a lot better than I expected it to be, so I'm going to give Stowaway overall a B-. Over, guys, my review of Stowaway. Let me know what you guys saw of this movie. All left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.